Chinese like to talk about tonics and pu all the time. First, we should realize that not everybody needs tonics. Remember, we were saying people who have excess and have deficiency, or shi and xi. Tonics are for xi zheng. That means you have some deficiency in qi or deficiency in blood and so forth. But if you have excess heat, for example, you don't need a lot of tonic. In fact, the tonics could harm you if you have an excess syndrome. So pu is basically for deficiency. But the fact is, especially among Asian people, there's a tendency to have deficiency. And the deficiency can come in several forms. Very broadly, we can talk about 4 kinds of deficiency. There's a deficiency of qi, deficiency of blood, deficiency of yin, and deficiency of yang. So accordingly, we talk about qi tonics, blood tonics, yin tonics, and yang tonics. So each is one big category in itself. And a person who needs to pu, who needs a tonic, must first find out whether he or she is deficient in qi or in blood or in yin or in yang. Sometimes it can be a combination of several of these things. So it is not a straightforward thing of, I'm feeling weak, therefore I take a tonic. First of all, you may not even need a tonic, if you're not in a deficiency state. But if, as most people are, you're in a deficiency state, then you still have to find out which particular kind of deficiency you have in order to decide which kind of tonic you should have. Chinese physicians should be able to look at you, look at your face, look at your tongue, look at your medical history, and you should be able to tell quite quickly whether you have one kind of deficiency or the other. But there are some things that you sometimes can see for yourself. For example, let's talk about qi deficiency. Qi deficiency is actually very common in Singapore and in most countries where people are busy and don't have enough time to eat well or sleep well, often have qi deficiency. Typically, a person with qi deficiency, face tends to be a bit pale, the tongue is a bit pale, gets tired easily, right? Sometimes a bit breathless, and sometimes may feel a little bit dizzy or weak. Now, the tonics for qi deficiency, there are many of them. In fact, many tonics out there that people take are qi tonics. And many are actually used in cooking, in Chinese cooking. For example, astragalus or pakei. The Cantonese call it pakei, or in Mandarin it's called huangqi or peiqi. Right? Astragalus is a very common herb, and it is a very good qi tonic. It's a very good all-round qi tonic. The other common tonic is, of course, everybody knows is ginseng, right? Now, actually, ginseng is a generic term for several things. The most common ginseng in China is, of course, Renhai or just called ginseng. This kind of ginseng is slightly warm, right? And it's a very good qi tonic. It is what we call 大补元气, which means it is a tonic for the most fundamental or the original qi, so to speak. It's slightly warm, but so if a person already is a bit heaty or warm, Renhai may not be the best qi tonic. There's another kind of ginseng which is called American ginseng or xi yangshen, or in short it's just called yangshen, or Hokkien say niu sim, right? American ginseng or xi yangshen is cool, slightly cool. So it is quite suitable for people in this climate. We tend to be usually a little bit heaty, sore throat. And because American ginseng is slightly cool, it's actually much better for most people. But for people whose stomachs and spleen are a little bit on the weak or the cool side, it may be too cool and it could be a little bit harmful to their stomach. So one has to look at the constitution of the person who is taking the ginseng to see whether American ginseng or Chinese ginseng is more suitable. But for most people in Singapore, I would say that American ginseng is more likely to be the right one to use. By the way, it's also a lot cheaper. Then there are other kinds of ginseng, very popular for people who go to Korea, is to buy Korean ginseng. Right? Korean ginseng is a very warm form of ginseng, and it's good for people who live in cold climates, or for people who are very weak and very feeble, because it's quite warm and quite strong. And it may not be suitable for most people in Singapore because it may be just a bit too warm. And it is also possible, there are some reports that it may also elevate the blood pressure. These are unconfirmed reports, by the way, but there's some suspicion that it could also elevate blood pressure. So people with high blood pressure may have to be a bit more careful about taking a stronger kind of warm Korean ginseng. But going with the Qi tonics, there's also Shan Yao. Shan Yao or Huai Shan. Shan Yao or Huai Shan is actually used quite a lot in cooking. You can actually buy the fresh ones in the market. It comes as a white root. But Shan Yao is also in dried form or powdered form, which you can get from a Chinese medicine shop. It's a very good tonic for the spleen qi, the qi of the spleen, and good for your digestive system. So it's not a bad idea if you want to have a stronger, better digestive system with better qi, to take a bit of Shan Yao with your porridge. If you eat porridge every morning, to put a bit of Shan Yao inside the porridge. Over time it could build up the qi in your spleen. Blood deficiency is a bit like anemia. Person tends to be pale. Sometimes you don't sleep so well if you have blood deficiency. And there are other things you can look at. Usually it takes a physician to spot them. For women, blood deficiency could lead to irregular menses and so forth. Blood deficiency, the most common tonic is tang kui. Tang kui, which is why women often take tang kui after the menses period. But tang kui actually can be taken by men too. It's not just for women. But the other blood tonics are he shou wu, or shou wu, which is a black herb. People sometimes take it to darken their hair. And there is also shao yao. Yin and yang deficiency are a little bit harder to detect for those who are not sort of trained in it. But normally yang deficiency, it could be yang deficiency of the kidney, for example, of the shen. Yang deficiency usually exhibits itself in being afraid of cold. Sometimes you get a dull, aching back, and this tendency to urinate more, frequent urination. And for men, sometimes it can be associated with sexual dysfunction. Which is why we often talk about pu yang or zhuang yang, which is to boost the yang, especially the yang of the kidney system. Now the yang tonics are things like lu rong, deer's horn, and chong chao, dong chong chao, cordyceps, and tu zhong, which is the bark of a tree. All these are yang tonics. Yin deficiency, on the other hand, is where you have less yin than yang. That means your yin has been affected in some way. For example, due to not enough sleep, overwork, or too much exposure to heat and too much perspiration, it may damage the yin of your body. So when the yin is weakened, yang is relatively stronger. So when the yang is relatively stronger than yin, it exhibits itself in some kind of a heat, because yang is associated with warmth and yin with cold. So with the yin deficiency, you have a bit of internal heat. Sometimes you can see that the cheeks are a little red, the tongue has not much fur on it, tends to be quite red, you tend to have sore throats, and you tend to feel thirsty. Those are classic symptoms of yin deficiency. And some people may perspire in their sleep, which is called tao han. Means you sleep and you wake up, you find your whole body is wet with perspiration. But sometimes it's a consequence of yin deficiency. So the yin tonics there are quite a lot of them. There's goqi or wolfberry seeds, yi zhu, mai dong are some of the common ones. Some of the soups that you drink, like turtle soup, are also yin tonics.